think we're going to kind of get started, and don't be shy to type questions ahead of time. I'm just going to do a quick introduction of how things are going, and then we'll go from there. So, good afternoon, everybody from at least the Pacific Coast. I hope you're enjoying the videos that everybody's been creating for the hackathon. I just want to kind of introduce a couple of the panelists, or have the panelists introduce themselves. And then we're going to ask that you use the QA button to ask questions because it's easier for us to keep track of everything that way. So why don't you start, Matt, with an introduction of yourself?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Matt Hoff. I'm a Quexington on Keybase. You probably see me hanging out on the Chialisp channel. I was a community member for Chia before I worked here, and then I got brought on, and I'm just writing smart coins now. So I made the video series for writing and the whole life cycle of a Chia application. So if you watch those, that was me.
Cool. Thanks. And Adam, can you introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Adam Kelly. I live in Northern California. Been working on this technical type of stuff for a while, and I've worked a little bit on the Chialisp compiler, which mostly Richard wrote. And I was here when Matt started poking around and learning everything really quickly.
Okay.
Richard?
Great. So I like to introduce myself. I am efficient on Keybase, and I am going to be the moderator for this afternoon's Q&A. Again, as a reminder, please use the Q&A button to ask your questions. And if after this Q&A session you have any follow-up questions, feel free to ask them on Keybase on our Chialisp channel. With that, I'm going to switch off screen sharing there and have you guys see our lovely faces, and we can start. So
Yeah, I see there's a question already.
yeah, so the first question is, how can I use announcements to choose a price that my partial offer might clear at?
Yeah, maybe I could start, and then Matt, you want to finish it off, or um, okay. So well, I think I'll need a little more information to know exactly the parameters you're doing. But it sounds like what you want is you want um, 2 coins at least, and the puzzle that's going to set the prices. Um, you you probably want to use announce puzzle hash, and then on the client side you want to use assert puzzle hash. Um, that gives you control over the keys for the announcing puzzle, and you can just rerun that at any time. When you run that, others can pull that announcement off only in that block that you announce it at. So if you'll have to decide on how frequently you want to announce that value, say maybe every 10 blocks, or it probably shouldn't be every block. If you need more info, please submit another question and we can keep it going.
Yeah, the current way that offers are built, you won't have like an offer file that they've been talking about in the previous Q&As. You don't have to assert any announcements for that. That's just you're going to set the price in your offer. You're going to say, I will offer 10 Matt coin for 5 Chia or whatever. That is not going to require an announcement. If you're talking about using like a price oracle of some sort, that's the kind of thing where a price oracle would announce it probably as frequently as they could, and then you would want to assert from that puzzle hash what price you would want to make your transaction at.
Yeah. So we'll need a little more info to know if you even need announcements in this case.
Okay, cool. So, I heard an interesting rumor, Matt, that there's a potential bug or exploit in your particular piggy bank. You wanna talk about that particular thing?
Yeah, so this is why it's very important to have as many eyes on your smart coin before you release it. Because we just wrote this, like me and Matt uh, kind of talked about it once, then we each wrote our own version of it and didn't let anyone else look at it. And so yeah, very important to have as much eyes on it as you can. But it's a security bug in which you can have a flash loan, like of whatever amount of Chia, to meet your savings goal. And if you do that, you can cash out your piggy bank early, take all of the money that you shouldn't be able to retrieve yet, and then return all the flash loan funds to the person who loaned it to you. So we just added a section on Chialisp.com today about that attack, the flash loan from God attack, where you can just borrow basically a theoretical infinite amount of money to withdraw your piggy bank funds early. Um, but yeah, so yeah, again, important to have eyes on it.
So as a follow-up to the previous question about announcements, the person is asking if it's about an Oracle version. So can you talk a little bit about oracles?
Yeah. So I just finished up a video that talks a bit about oracles, especially in the third part. So I'll probably take a couple of days to go through our post-processing team. Um, but basically, um, there are only two announcements in Chialisp. Um, the announced by puzzle hash, which you can which ties you to a family of coins, and announced by coin ID, which ties you to a specific coin. Um, so if, for example, if your oracle is controlled by one person, and you know it also is controlled by uh, an ag sigme, a private key signing, then you can just use the puzzle announcement, because you, as the controller of that oracle, are signing off on each uh, manually, essentially. Um, see what else about oracles. Um, oh yeah, the message format when you make an announcement. Um, so when you make an announcement, let's take the puzzle hash version. The puzzle hash from the announcing coin is sort of smushed together with the data that you are. Um, could one of you guys mute? I think there might be a hot mic. Um, so the puzzle hash from the announcing coin is smushed together with the data that you're announcing, and those are chained together so that you know for sure that was announced by a coin with that puzzle hash. The other part to know is the data itself can be any arbitrary CLVM data. What you'll see a lot in our puzzles is we'll hash together all of the stuff that we want to tie down, and then we'll just announce that hash, because the presumption is that the other side, the other coin's puzzle, kind of knows the format that we're working with, so it will sort of do the reverse operation to check that the values that it thinks it's getting are the ones that have been announced. I hope that makes it a little more clear.
That sounds pretty good. Do you have anything to add, Matt?
No, I just the only thing I would say, it's a really cool feature that they have in there, that they didn't always have, the asserting a puzzle announcement rather than a coin announcement. You don't always want to just assert from one, one person controls one coin that can exist until it is spent. You want to be able to assert from an entire rule set. You want to say, if this coin follows this rules, I will listen to what they say. So that's a really cool feature that is not in a lot of our puzzles yet. So yeah, it's something cool to
Yeah,
check out.
it's
It is in Point
powerful.
Protocol.
Um, yeah, it's powerful, and it also was very surprising to me when some of our other colleagues explained to me. Uh, how some of these cross-coin communications work. Like the fact that they're only visible to the coins themselves within the same block, and that it sort of all happens at once. Because in Bitcoin, there's more of an idea of a transaction, and you can sort of pick them apart and say like, oh, this transaction happened, and there's like a big list in that block. But in this system, all the spends are thrown in, and then all the spends that pass validation go through. And so on the one hand, it's harder to pick apart transactions, but on the other hand, it means that multiple coins can join in and determine whether or not a spend goes through. So you can have some very powerful things. It's very easy to do multi-sig sign-offs and things like that in this system.
Cool. That sounds great. So I think a lot of people are going to be very new to Chialisp, and it's a bit a mind shift, change from coming from Solidity or other programming languages. I'd like to hear each of you what kind of your story of how what it took you to kind of shift your mind to really work in Chilis. Like what unlocked you? It sounds like every single programmer has a different story around the company. I'd love to hear your two stories about what unlocked for you, and then it was like, yeah, this is how we do it.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's I had the same reaction that I think I see a lot of people have, which is that this is gross. I don't want to write this language. One of my first instincts was to, oh, I'm going to make Chia script. I'm going to make JavaScript that compiles into, and that was not as easy as I thought it might be. But yeah, I think one of the things that really helped me, I was thinking about it today. I made that the syntax highlighter for Atom, and the way that the syntax highlighter uses a package called tree sitter, which is like the syntax highlighting is done recursively, and that actually fit really well with Chialisp because Chialisp is like a very recursive thinking language. You got to think about like things that are like inside of other things a lot. And writing that syntax highlighter actually gave me a good kind of idea of how the language as a whole worked, and kind of helped me as I was crawling through Chialisp.com. So yeah, it's a weird way to think about it, and a lot of it is not even just the language, but the kind of way that the network works, and how it's different from other cryptocurrencies. But I think it's a steep learning curve, but once you get your mind around it, it's very interesting and fun to do.
Matt, I was watching some of your videos yesterday, and man, I really like that syntax highlighter. What was is that written in JavaScript? That part of the editor plugin?
Yeah, it's a you can Google it. I don't know. They don't use it in a lot of other code editors, but it's called tree sitter. It's like a method for syntax highlighting, and basically you define something, and then you can use that definition in other definitions, and that was really helpful for Lisp because it's like, okay, I define a function, and this function is going to have parameters, and so on and so forth. So
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean about the, oh man, so I look at it and I'm like, hmm, other programmers are not going to be happy. We need to cross compile from something else into this. And maybe one day we'll have a tool like that. But I'm I'm a little I think I'm a little weird as programmers go. I'm very sort of my one of my hobbies is computer languages. So I was pretty familiar with um, Lisp-like languages before in the abstract, but I didn't have a lot of practical experience. This is um, probably the first or maybe second time of actually using it for production work. So I definitely had a bit of a learning curve, especially for some of the features that are um, like um, for example, I was writing something in the lower level, not the Chia Lisp language, but in CLVM directly, and I was having a very hard time. I was having to loop over some things, but I needed to pass multiple arguments into this function, and that was, I mean, the code was getting very verbose. Anyway, I won't go into that example, but I I really love that everything is immutable and you cannot change the value of a variable in. And there are also some things about um, having trees built in and having very few data types that I think leads to pretty compact code. Now, there are other things that we are missing in the higher level Chialisp language that definitely make our programs longer than they should be. But I don't know. I guess that's been my first impressions. Uh, I think the more difficult things for me were not the language, but understanding the the terminology we were using and the relationship between like, okay, well, when do the arguments get passed in and when do they get passed out and who looks at these arguments we're passing out? When I had other people explain that to me, then everything sort of fell into place.
Great. For some of your newcomers, just in case you didn't know, feel free to type your questions using the Q&A button. Otherwise, we'll continue doing some more random questions related to Chialisp that will help you guys get a better idea of how and things work. So I think we learned a lot when we did the pooling plot NFTs, and I know both of you were heavily involved with that. I'd love to hear each one of you what key thing you learned, or something that helped you get better at Chialisp while doing the plot NFT. So who wants to take a first stab at this?
Yeah, I can go. Okay, yeah, I'll just go ahead. Yeah, it's I joined right when, like, in the middle of the pooling mania. So I spent a lot of time like having to go through that code, and I spent a lot of time with Matt and Richard on like we would just go through every single line, try to make sure everything was secure and whatnot. And I learned a lot of cool techniques like inline functions was something that I didn't have a good grasp of, and I realized it's really important for optimization. I learned a lot of optimization tricks and stuff like that. So yeah, the pooling puzzles they use pretty much every concept you can think of. So if you can wrap your mind around those, you'll have a very good start on your understanding of Chialisp and how it can work to secure things.
Yeah, yeah. Not only every facet of Chialisp, but also um, that project spans the whole thing from the farmer, all the way down to the spends across multiple coins and back up. So I learned a lot about how the let's call it the farmer block program works. Because when you spend a Chialisp coin, um, let's call it as a normal spend, there's some existing coin, and then you you have chosen the program to associate with that. So, but there are also coins that are created when new blocks are created, and those coins also have a program. And where does that program come from? And that's determined when the farmer farms the block. Another thing I learned from that project was I hadn't spent a lot of time on the Chialisp side of the signature verification stuff. So I watched a lot of what Mariano was doing um, with with signatures and learned how that worked a lot better.
Cool. So I have a question from the audience is, do you worry about Chialisp will turn away potential dev and dApp developers?
I do not. I think it's a fantastic language for programming money. I know it's a steep learning curve, but like once you get over that hump, like you'll realize just like how like powerful and secure and just elegant it is. Um, so I think just the fundamental benefits that it has with the way that it's built is going to attract people to want to put their um, money on Chia for things that Chia does really well. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you a lot. There is a price to be paid in learning if you are from another language, but it's much better to be safe. I'll take the next one. Hey, Moto. Um, so making a fiat to Chia kiosk. I think one of the first things I would be worried about if I were using such a system is I would want to know, well, let's see. Um, I guess I guess the question is, are you, the user of the kiosk, going to provide an address to the kiosk to to get the money sent to? If that's the case, there's not a lot of security worries because you'll be able to verify that in your wallet pretty quickly. Our blocks come fairly frequently. But if it prints out a receipt, like you say, then I'd be worried about a few things. I'd want to know what the puzzle um, was that that money had been paid to. I think I'd be much more comfortable having the money paid into a wallet address that I provided. So that might be a bit of design advice for a situation like that.
So the follow-up is the proposal is basically to print an offer or a coin which can be accepted by anyone, but only
I
once.
I see. Okay. I'll I'll think about it a bit more, and maybe Matt, you want to think about it too. Maybe we can come back to that and answer a bit more in depth later.
Okay. So we'll get to another question and then we'll get back to this one. So the description of having various color coins with the denominated value sounds like having a stack of poker chips at a poker table. Is that the best way to think of it, or do you have a better analogy?
That works for me. It's just, it's money that is not money. Like a poker chip, you're only going to be able to give that to the casino. If you take that, to McDonald's, they're not going to accept a poker chip as payment. And that's kind of how colored coins work. It's money that has specific rules that someone has issued, and that they're probably only going to accept, but that they might talk other people into accepting as well. So poker chips are a good example because they're like money but not, sort of.
Cool. So while you're still stewing on the other question, let me ask this to both of you. Um, what do you think Chia, from your perspective, Chialisp is better at doing than other smart contract languages, based on your experience or from your viewpoint? So, like, even give an example of what particular dApp you think is Chia is really great at that would be problematic for Solidity, or just some ideas so people get wrap their head of why they should go on this journey to learn how to use Chialisp.
Yeah. One thing that, I mean, okay, disclaimer, I'm not, like, Chia is my first basically intro to cryptocurrency. Like, I don't have any experience with Ethereum or Bitcoin really. I've just heard stories mostly. But I do know, I think, kind of the basics about how Ethereum works. And one thing that Chia does differently than Ethereum is the decentralization of the contracts. Um, I like to point at dID as a big example. A smart contract dID thing would have to be sort of centralized. Like, there's a contract that issues the identities and whatnot. But in Chia, with dID, you can just make your own dID. Like, you don't have to go to anybody. You just go ahead and print your own decentralized identity that conforms to some standard, and no one had to give you that token or anything like that. You just walk around and you have the token that you made yourself, and you can prove to other people, hey, I own this token, and I can, vouch for certain things that require my identity. Um, it's just kind of a more decentralized version from what I understand. And I would recommend checking out the Why Chia is Great video that I think was uploaded recently to chialisp.com in the tutorial section.
Cool. Adam?
Yeah. From my perspective, um, we've had the advantage of going after a lot of other cryptocurrencies. So we've been able to incorporate some of the design decisions that other people, have come to later, or the math has come out later, and they've had to sort of painstakingly stuff those in. But we've had the luxury of um, deciding on the properties of the on-chain programming language from day one, um, designing a very small and easy to verify one. Um, and then we also have the advantage of being able to choose our our elliptic curve. So that gives us some advantages in multi-sig. Um, Also, because of uh, some of our decisions, I think it's much cleaner to do multi-sig, uh, taproot, coin join, uh, distributed swap and offers, trading things without an exchange. I think all of those cases are much easier in this language than, say, on Bitcoin. You can do it, and that ecosystem is more developed. So as a person coming to it new, uh, you might actually be able to do it just as fast with them. But if you're building it yourself, I think this system is easier.
Great. So the person who asked about the kiosk did a follow-up use case. He said, if I put in 25 cents, press turn it into Chia, a coin is created from a pre-existing balance of Chia held by the kiosk and encoded in a way that it can be added to any other address. Is that possible, and how would you go about doing that?
That definitely seems possible. It's a little weird. I haven't thought about every angle of it, but it feels like basically what you'd be doing is you'd be printing them a private key that you sent money to, basically. Um, and that seems a little weird. I would rather just like somehow have them give you their address and just send them the money directly, and then they can. I don't know if we have mobile wallets eventually. They can check to see that they got the money. It seems to take out one extra step there, but that definitely would be possible doing it that way.
Yeah, it's possible. It's just that there are some downsides to it, because you have to give up the private key so that you can spend it later. And so there it is in plain text on the paper, unless you figure out some encryption that the person has to type in or something, and then they might forget it. It's there's a lot that could go wrong doing it that way.
Yeah, and there's a further clarification that is to create paper XCH, in which case that private key method would not be great, because if you try to I assume the idea is to be able to give it to someone, and if the person who gave it to you wrote down that private key, then they can just take all the money. So yeah, I don't know. There have to be some fun cryptographic magic that goes in there.
Okay, cool. So each of you came from a different perspective joining Chia. Love to hear your story of why you decided to join Chia. So Matt, you said you came from the community, so I think it'd be great to hear how how your journey was to get there.
Yeah, no, it's just from my perspective, it's good technology and it's very interesting. Chialisp is a fantastic language to mess around in. Um, there's so much opportunity too. There's just so many things that need to exist eventually on the blockchain, and there's just you can just pick from anything, any app you see out there, you can just do that. So it just really sparked my interest, and I was just really active in the community, answering questions about Chialisp and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm just a fan.
He's also a really good Chialisp programmer. Let me see. For me, I actually worked with Bram before, so I knew a little bit what I was getting into. Um, so I had that advantage. I've also been in a lot of startups before, so I know I won't say I know what to look for, but I know what I don't want. and and Chia did not have any of those. The other thing that I knew I could depend on was really good technical decisions and know-how. Um, I already knew that from knowing Bram, but uh, talking to other people before I joined, Richard and Bill and everyone, I was super impressed. So frankly, it didn't matter how far along it was. I knew I wanted to get involved, and it it went really fast.
So as a follow-up on the kiosk question again, can you make it something like a gift card instead of having, you know, paper XCH?
Matt, what do you
It's
think?
like
Is there a way to involve some other authority that would take away some of these problems?
yeah, I'm not sure. It has the same fundamental problem as the paper with that you can just take the information that's printed on it, um, and use that to spend the coin. So giving it to someone is not great because like that's the whole problem with the digital space is that you can copy paste things, right? So um, yeah, I'm not sure. Again, I
Yeah,
haven't thought about it a ton, but maybe you could get some kind of um, proof that you're handing that gift card to them on the blockchain as well. That defeats a little bit
yeah,
of the handing it over by paper part, though. So I'm not sure.
yeah. I mean, I might think of something later, and if I do, I'll certainly try and get the word out in the Chialisp channel on Keybase or maybe on our blog. But I'm with Matt. It's kind of like I don't know if you remember in the early days there were those Bitcoin coins, and they had the key written inside, and you had to break them open to know what was in there. But so that's good. It's a physical thing that you have to pass. But if the guy who put that fortune cookie inside the gold coin wrote it down, like there's no, you can't stop that. So you might have a 100 Bitcoin, you know, pseudo gold coin that has long ago been uh, looted. So it's a pretty fundamental problem. But I will think
That
about it
is
more after we're done.
that is a good point too. That whoever is doing this also has to trust the kiosk, so that's another point of trust, which is usually what you're trying to avoid.
Yeah. If you did it on a person's smartphone and you can somehow do from smartphone to smartphone something more digital that each person holds on to, I
Yeah,
think that can definitely work much easier in your particular case, I think. But you guys are the experts.
yeah. Well, it's not the so thanks for bringing that up. It's not the digital nature of it, although that does make it convenient and it does mean it's easy to check and see if the money arrived in your wallet. It's the fact that the, the the person who's using the kiosk, it's the fact that you give the address to the other person. So now, if you at home made a QR code, if you just printed that out on a sheet of paper and then you scan that at the kiosk, see now the authority, the flow of authority is going the other way from the user. So now the user doesn't have to trust the kiosk as much um, because you're giving it an address where you know the program, you know that they don't know the private key. So although you don't have the quick, I can check my wallet on my phone, at least you're taking away those other two security issues that are inherent if someone hands you a private key with money on it. Um,
Okay, cool. That's a very fun thing to think about. So I'm sure each of you have sort of like a favorite dApp you would love to see on Chia, even if you had personally infinite time to work on it yourself. So maybe you can give inspiration to the folks out there what they might want to work on that you would be happy to see. Any ideas there, Matt?
Yeah, not too sure. I mean, NFTs are fun. They're gonna come eventually. They're gonna have a reference for them eventually. But games and stuff like that would be fun to play. I would like to play that on Chia. Um, yeah, I know. One of the first projects that I decided to work on. This is another example of just all this stuff that people have already figured out. Just needs to be implemented on Chia. Is atomic swaps. So like maybe being able to swap Chia for other things. That's a little bit weird because you have to do the Chia side and the other coin side, but um, that would be cool to be able to just kind of swap Chia for other coins atomically. Um, but yeah, there's all sorts of things. Just pick a dApp, do it. They're not there, I promise.
I think, oh man, I'd like to see um, something bridging two exchanges or two currencies. I know there's a lot of non-technical stuff in that too, so I'll try and think of something a bit more on chain. Yeah, I'm a fan of games too. I mean, even simple ones, uh, because I like writing programs. So um, I like even a game like tic-tac-toe, you're forced to deal with the fact that you have to save the game board each move, and that you take care of all these cases. I, I would love to see an example like that. Um, Maybe there's some crazy way to turn your classic video game collection into an NFT where you sort of compete with other people. I don't know how you would prove that you had those cartridges, though. That's a difficult question.
Okay. Um, there were some additional things written on the chat regarding the whole concept of the kiosk. Ultimately, the person asking questions is just he wants to have a mechanism for transferring the value from the purchaser to the person who ultimately holds the Chia wallet. I guess they're assuming is the kiosk is sort of the intermediary. And let's assume since this idea is mostly for demo purposes, the end users are willing to trust the kiosk with their spare change. So maybe so I guess a donation kiosk.
Oh, is the person using the kiosk giving money to the kiosk, or are they getting Chia out of the kiosk?
It
I'll read
sounds
the
like
chat. I
yeah,
was
read
reading
the
only
chat.
the Q&A.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, it's in the chat. It sounds like he's saying they're giving spare change to the kiosk. So the kiosk is accepting money. I'm not sure. You put in fiat coin, you get out a receipt with Chia.
Yeah, you also had a
Um,
message above that about talking about making clear that it's basically a bare password, and that is what it is. So that would, if you wanted to do that, um, you could. Uh,
yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible. Like if you trust the kiosk, um, that that is no problem. Let's see, technical details. You would let's see, you'd have to run a node. You'd need a wallet connected to the kiosk. So what's the security risk there? Yeah, okay. So then if you trust those parts of the system, then I think the next security problem I would start looking at is uh, how how to connect, how to protect the wallet that is connected to the kiosk. So think about you know, is it going to be a hot wallet? Should it be in another room, secured behind a metal door? I'd need more time to think it through, but I think that's the next place I would start to look for security problems is the wallet that's uh, printing the receipts. Oh, you
Okay.
could also audit the system somewhat by uh, publishing your transactions that are happening on the blockchain, so other people could see uh, which coins are paying out the money.
Okay, cool. Um, the kiosk will go in my backpack. It's powered by Rock Pi for V. That's an interesting concept. Okay. So out of curiosity, each of you have kind of worked a little bit on the Chialisp stuff. What's upcoming for you guys on working on Chialisp related stuff that you might be able to share to the community? It'd be kind of nice to people get a flavor of who's working on what.
Yeah, I'm spending most of my time right now on the dev tools that I demoed a little bit in the video, in the videos, trying to get that to be as useful as possible. And then after that, I'm not sure. Color coins are a pretty big priority for us right now, so I've spent a little time with those as well, so that might be something I could work on as well. But like I said, most of my attention right now is focused on the dev tools.
Yeah, I'm really happy you're doing that because it cuts out so much of the things that can get in your way and just stop you dead in your tracks. It's like, okay, now I had to go learn all this other stuff before I can do the thing I want to do. Um, yeah, so everybody definitely check out Matt's video where he shows you the new tool name. Which repo is that in? Is that a new repo?
Yeah, if you know how to make a Python virtual environment, just go in and then pip install chia-dev-tools.
Oh, great name. For me, I don't have any um, Chialisp specifically uh, work specifically assigned to me right now. Um, wait, okay, I do have one thing. Richard, not this Richard, another Richard who wrote all the CLVM implementation. He wrote a new compressor, which is very exciting. So uh, the way the Chia blocks work is that to generate the data that constitutes a block, a program is run. So you can sort of compress redundant information very well. So I'm doing some work to just integrate his changes and sort of give people a plug-in system. This would mostly be interesting for farmers and uh, saving block fees once blocks become full. But that's a bit more into the future. Personally, what I'd be interested in doing is some improvements on higher level Chialisp languages, places where I've ran into trouble where in more mature languages like Scheme or Lisp or ML or whatever, you have a bit more language there. A colleague of ours named Art actually implemented let, which if you're a functional programmer, um, it allows you to. This doesn't really say how much it helps you, but it allows you to bind other variables from your environment. So you don't have to pass in every value that you need in your functions. It can cut down on the verbosity a lot. So I'll be excited to see him get that in. Um, yeah, and I'd be excited to work on the compiler if that's. I don't think we know yet what's the highest priority though.
Cool, cool. I just want to remind everybody in the audience we have about 13 minutes left, so I want to make sure if you really do have a question, you start typing in the Q&A, so we have enough time to answer. So in the meantime, well, I'll keep on asking some random questions to these guys here while we have them. So just to get people a little flavor of each of you guys, just to kind of know who you are. Why don't you tell a little story about yourself that you probably think is a trivia that most people won't know if from whatever they've read about you so far. Get a little personal trivia about yourself. Matt, you start.
I mean, I like to. I like to run. I'm a runner. I one day hope to identify as a marathon runner, but I'm not there yet. So that's somewhat of what
Wow.
I do in my free time. That's yeah. I'm not a very exciting person. I mostly do Chia things and play video games.
How about you,
Oh,
Adam?
we'll have to talk about which video games you like. Um, for me, man, you hitting us with these questions. I didn't know you were gonna ask this. All right. Something you may not know. I once saw a man fight a shark. Um, it was uh, it was my uncle, and he was he was displeased because the shark had taken something of his, so he went down, took it back. It was very eye-opening. Um, but I see in the chat there's a question about singletons and plot ownership. So I'll start that one off, Matt, if you want to jump in and help me. um, so yeah, singletons. So I'm really excited by this formulation that Richard and Bram and Matt have come up with, because the language is very flexible. I mean, almost too flexible. If you write a very large program, it can be hard to understand. So uh, we've come up with this format where you can write kind of an outer program that manages the state transitions from coin to coin of a coin that you want to have only one of at a time. And that outer wrapper plus some of the uh, traditions of how you use it is called singleton. And we then use that idea to make a cleaner uh, contract for the plot NFTs. Um, so the reason that you can transfer plot ownership is that when you make a new plot, it has to do with the plot format. So when you make a new plot, um, there's there's a plot key and there's a farmer key, and because each because each plot has its own key, that's kind of the crux of why you can um, hand the ability to farm it off to someone else. Um, the uniqueness, the NFT-ness of the plots uh, revolves around that unique plot key that each plot has. Even if they were made with the same uh, plot NFT key, there's an individual plot key. I don't want to get too deep in how plots work right now because that could easily be an hour by itself.
On a
There's a
high, go ahead, Matt.
sorry. There's just another concern there with using the singleton. You can transfer the plots like that if you want to, but the farmer key isn't bound by the singleton, so the farmer key is still going to just get its rewards like normal. So that's something you have to take into account as well. Is that you can transfer the singleton and that will guarantee them the pool rewards, but you could technically keep their farmer key and try and a copy of their plots and try to like front run them for rewards.
Yeah,
So it's
so that
something
that, that means that person who's cheating would keep 1/8 of the block reward. Is that right, Matt?
potentially. I don't think there's a way to attack it except that you have to keep an actual copy of the plot and farm it. It's not a very sophisticated attack because you're getting like kind of half the rewards from a normal plot. So why won't you just replot? But that is technically an attack. Is that they could hold on to it and farm for your farmer rewards. And if they get the block before you do, then you just wasted a potential win. So yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for pointing out that they're not so they're not fully transferable the way that we made them. Um, it is one of only two design decisions I sort of regret. D- I mean, this this decision was made a long time ago, but I'm pretty happy that we have the ability to switch from pool to pool, and like nobody can take that away from you. That's a big win.
Yeah, that's definitely a unique feature of pooling that I've not seen in other cryptos. And as
Yep.
of, go ahead, Matt.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to bring up one thing that singletons are transferable though. Singletons, the ones that are bound to the plots, aren't. It's not super handy to do that way. But singletons are definitely transferable, and there are use cases in which you would want to do singleton transfers. Like you can send it just like any other coin to someone else, and they own that singleton. Um, and that's helpful for things like DIDs if you want to give that identity to someone else or something like that. So I just wanted to bring up that the plots aren't a great use case for transferring singletons, but they are definitely transferable, and there are use cases for that.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Right, because just because this one case has these sort of technicalities that don't have anything to do with singletons, but singletons in general uh, are transferable in a way that the original owner cannot take them back. So, yeah, that's a really good point.
Okay, it looks like it's trivia to Adam here. What are you listening to these days, Adam?
Oh, music. Um, you know, I'm kind of a boring person. When I'm programming, I generally listen to music that doesn't have a lot of lyrics in it. So, sort of maybe vaporwave or synthwave type stuff, maybe a little classical. But when I want to, get outside that zone, I like things like, pirate metal, Sabaton, uh, normal programmer stuff.
Okay, Matt, is that normal programmer stuff for you?
I'm not familiar with those bands or genres, but I don't listen to music that much when I code. I don't know if you ever heard of it. There's something called slow TV, and I've been watching a canal take a 7.5 hour trip around a canal in London.
Oh, that is awesome. Wait,
That's what
you
I do
you
when I'm
can't
coding.
get away, Richard. You got to answer this one too. What are you listening to?
I am a OG Taylor Swift fan. So, and I'm in the zone of wanting to just kind of listen to some music on loop. There'll be some Taylor Swift songs. So, because I used to like to do country line dancing and country music, and she was very popular in the country days. And when she shifted to pop, I still follow her. So, uh, it's funny because my daughter finds it really she loves Taylor Swift. She finds it funny that I'm an actual OG Taylor Swift Swiftie fan, because she's like, I didn't think that was even possible, is what she said when she was old enough to know who Taylor Swift was. So
That's
yeah.
that's so cool. I mean, I got to give Taylor Swift props. She's got a good voice.
So anyway, we have like 3 minutes left. And anybody got any other last minute questions, pop it in Q&A. Otherwise, I'm going to do a standard spiel near the end, which is to remind everybody that we're here to support you. Come join Keybase. Type your message in Chialisp. There is no dumb questions, so don't feel embarrassed. Even if you're starting, I think I saw earlier today, Quexington, which is Matt Hoff, was answering somebody who never programmed before, to get them set up on Chialisp, and we're there for that. As the questions start flowing in, there's more. We're hoping that there's a whole community of people who can answer besides ourselves, and we hope you help build this community. So we're kind of really excited that you're at the start, what I consider the start of a new wave of how cryptocurrency smart contracts can work, and being on the ground floor has some really good advantages. The Chia developers had a chance to learn just about a year ahead of you guys, but we want to transfer that knowledge as quickly as possible to all of you now. So you are that first generation, the OG Chia Lisp programmers that will hopefully spawn the new generation of Chialisp programmers. So So that's kind of my spiel before we end, making sure you know that. If you want to continue looking at some of the QAs on chialisp.com/training, there's 2 more Q&A sessions that you can join if you have other questions that you think of later. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know yet what our cadence is going to be, but I'm pretty sure we want to at least do once a month, sort of like Chialisp AMA questions, specifically for devs. But we haven't really figured that out yet because that'll be somebody else's job. So yeah. So that's about it. So I'm not gonna wrap it up yet. We're gonna have 2 more minutes. We're gonna do the full hour. Just want to do the end spiel first, so people who had a last minute question can get in there. So any parting thoughts, Matt and Adam? Since we don't have any questions here.
Well, what I learned today is that if you have any thief sharks that you have beef with, you know who to call.
I know a guy. Yeah, I just want to say thanks to all the developers who are coming in our Keybase channel and asking us some really good questions. Half the time, well, maybe slightly less now, I have to go look stuff up or read code or ask somebody else, and I've been programming for some time, at least 2 or 3 years. So um, if I'm still learning it, don't feel embarrassed. Just come ask us. We're pretty friendly. You can see Matt is.
Yeah, come to Keep It. It's fantastic. I'm eager to answer your questions.
Right. And just keep in mind, there's only really about a dozen people right now in the company who actually knows how to use Chialisp. So we understand this is a very small start. This is why we're trying to jumpstart the ecosystem with these videos, with these Q&As. We hope there'll be hundreds of people in the near future. And then we'll have sort of like a DevCon in a few years. That would be so awesome. I would love
that
to
would
see
be
it.
awesome.
So that's the dream for me. So anyway, thank you for coming, everybody. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. We're going to have this video on YouTube a little later tonight. And then there's 2 more sessions. So thank you again. And good luck with your Chialisp programming. Have a good night.